Good morning. How are you today? Good? Yeah, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Uh, our class today will be different because we have attended special guest lecture. Yeah. Today we will hear and listen about democracy in United States. Yeah. We have special lecture today. She is Ibu Dr. Kimberly Bomar ya. We can call her Ibu Bomar ya. Or Kimberly. Oh, Ibu Kim. Okay. Ibu Kim ya. Uh, so she will explain about uh, how situation, how recent situation in United States, yeah, about democracy, challenge and resilience in the United States. And today our class will be, yeah, pure class, yeah, like in other class, yeah. Uh, so feel free for Ibu Kim to explore the class, and Ibu Kim will ask to you immediately to students, and maybe also Ibu Kim will be ask your opinion about democracy, yeah, and resilience in the United States, yeah. Before that, let's start our class uh, by reciting dua. Let's start our class. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Raditu billahi robba wa bil islami dina wa bi muhammadin nabiyya wa rasula. Rabbi zidna ilman warzuqna fahman. Amin. So, along class, please your handphone be silent ya, and write the resume of this class today from the explanation from Ibu Kim ya. Maybe the duration from for our class is until 12 o'clock. Okay, until 12 o'clock. So there is 90 minutes ya, 90 minutes. Okay, Ibu Kim, please feel free to uh, give the lecture. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You also can explore the whiteboard.
Okay. Oh, this one. Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here, even though I understand it's mandatory for some of you. So you had no choice. But I'm very happy to be here to have an opportunity to share with you about a current political situations going on in the U.S. right now. So just to jump right into the topic, I've had the chance to talk about a few different issues. When I knew I was coming back to Jogja this year, I thought, well, if I have the opportunity, what can I share with students at UEE? In America right now, there really is only one issue, and you may have heard, and it's about democracy. And it's about challenges facing democracy right now that honestly, if I had been, when I was here a year ago, if anyone had told me that the US government would face the changes that it has faced, I would not have believed it. But here we are. So we're going to talk about what has happened in United States in terms of democracy, but we're also going to use just your general understanding of democracy as well. What I like to do is I'm not going to stand here and talk for 90 minutes. We're very clear about that. I want to hear your thoughts because when I ask about your thoughts and opinions about democracy, there's no right answer. So I'm going to ask you all to share and then also to share with me. And we're going to start with democracy. First thing is, when you think of democracy, what words come to mind? I don't mean Google, because we can all Google, the definition of democracy. But when you think about living under a country that is a democracy, what do you think about? We're not going to take a long time here, but what I'd like you to do is at least talk with your neighbors, 3 people near you, and think about, just so we can set the stage, what do we mean by democracy? Yes, you can turn around if you want to. But I would like a couple of volunteers. Raise your hand and tell me maybe what you or what your group thought. And there are no wrong answers because we're asking about your thoughts. Yes. What is your name? And I hope you heard that the people are the representatives, that the state is the representatives of the people. So it's the people's rights that should control. Anybody else have any thoughts? Yes. Yes. Government by the people. Bahasa Indonesia saya kurang, tetapi agak bisa. Jadi kalau ada yang lebih suka berbicara atau menjawab dengan bahasa Indonesia, silakan. Yes.
That the people have the right to vote, that they think is correct. It's for the people, to the people, and by the people.
Correct. That's a good one, of course, by the people, for the people, of the people, for the people. Okay, and was everyone over here? Did anybody over here answer? Yes.
So what comes to my mind when I heard the terms of democracy is the basic of welfare state.
Yes. And the welfare state, meaning it looks after the welfare of the people. So democracy is all about the people and the people's rights and the people to live in a way that they consider fair. So everything that everyone has said here, everyone has said here is crucial to democracy. Okay, so I'm just going to summarize some thoughts that, again, everything that you have said is absolutely essential to democracy, but I think everybody said this, that the power belongs to the people. Again, we're talking about an ideal, right? The way democracy should be. The power belongs to the people. And how do the people exert that power? Elections. Well, what if the elections are crooked? No, they have to be free and fair elections. Well, how can they be free and fair? Because we have laws that determine and dictate that they are fair. And the laws have to be enforced through a good judicial system and accountability to the public. But then what if some people are above the law? The rules don't apply to them. Democracy doesn't work that way. Everybody has to be equal. So these are only a few features of democracy. There are many, many more. For example, what if I vote for a candidate and my candidate loses? Has democracy failed? No. Okay, we followed the rules, the election was fair, my candidate lost, we'll do better next time. We'll see what happens. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is in the US, the threats to democracy. Sorry, I'll try to do this. And there's like 1,000 of them right now. The democracy is very much under attack in the US. But we only have 90 minutes, so we're only going to talk about three. Three that are some of the most important. Threats to voting rights. The right of the American people to vote. The loss of voter information. Because how can you vote if you don't have good information? And the impact of extreme wealth on US voting and democracy. Has anyone in here ever heard of Elon Musk?
Yes.
Mark Zuckerberg?
Yes.
I could go on. There's a Jeff Bezos. Yeah, all of these people are very active participants in the American voting system. And we're going to talk about what that means. Do you think I have the same impact on elections and with Donald Trump than Mark Zuckerberg does? Probably not. Okay. Let's continue here. So the first thing we're going to talk about is threats to voting rights. You probably know this person. I hope you know this person. But I want you to pay attention. Yes, Indonesian Europe. And I want you to pay attention to the date here, March 1983. March 1983. President Suharto was elected for his fourth, I think 6 terms. That was his 4th term in March 1983. September of 1983 is when I first came to Indonesia. This is my family, and this is at the Jogja train station, September 1983. So when I came here, I came from California, that's me in the middle, with the camera and the big suitcase. So I came here from California, and I was a young person, and from a small town, and did not know about politics other than my own. I did not know about religion other than my own. And my thoughts were very narrow. My worldview was very limited. But I came to Indonesia, and for me, everything changed. I was exposed to a new government, a new religion, a developing country, and mostly people who welcomed me with open arms, which is why I'm still coming back 40 years later. So September 1983, everything was new when I came to Indonesia, and I'm very grateful to the family that let me come and stay with him and learn so much. So when I came here, we had discussions about so many things. Good morning. Good morning. Yes, hello, thank you, welcome. One of the things that came up in our discussions was, does everyone in Indonesia have the right to vote? We can just have an election. Does everyone have the right to vote? And when I was talking with some people, they said no. The people are too uneducated. So my question was, can people vote? Ikut pemilihan umum? Tidak, karena pendidikan terlalu dasar. Pendidikan tidak cukup. For me, to say that people are too uneducated to vote was an exceptional and terrible thing to say. So I remember this saying that people are too uneducated to vote. That's the first thing we're going to talk. We already talked about democracy for a little bit. We're going to talk about voting rights. Okay, we're going to talk in your groups again, and we're going to take a few more second minutes this time. The first time it was just, what are your thoughts about democracy? Now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. Who gets to vote? Who should get to vote? Are there reasonable restrictions on voting? And I want you to consider a few things. What about children? We like to say everyone gets to vote. Babies don't get to vote, right? Children don't get to vote. Maybe we should have an advocate for children, because a lot of decisions made about the environment today don't affect you and me. It affects babies being born now. But do children get to vote? Should they? What about mental capacity? What if someone has dementia? They don't know who they are. They don't know who's running for the election. Or what if they are very depressed? Or what if they sometimes have occasional issues? So what does this impact someone's ability or right to vote? What about punishment? In the US, some people who are either in prison or went to prison, but they served their punishment and now they're free, they still don't have the right to vote. And some places, there are religious restrictions. Many years ago in the US, you could not vote unless you were a Christian in many places. So now I want you to talk about what are some reasonable restrictions. You can focus on these. If you like, you can think about others. But what are some reasonable restrictions on voting? Think about why and who gets to decide. And I'm not asking for answers, because at what age people get to vote, whether it's 18 or 21 or whatever, that's still being debated. But I want you to think about it, okay? So we're going to take a few minutes to think about in your groups, and when we finish, I'm going to ask for some volunteers to talk about just what you're thinking. There are no right answers, because I'm asking about your opinions. And then I will also say that because I am a woman in the law, and I think oftentimes women, when there are men in the rooms, will often tend to defer to men and to sit more quietly, I'm going to ask women students to please participate in the next round. Okay, let's discuss.
Next time, begin the discussion. Yes, to meet you. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm from
Are you a lawyer as well?
Yes, I was.
Yes.
Yeah, not mine.
Oh, wait, so you've been your full time?
Yeah, I finished there.
Yes. Okay. I invite you to participate.
Actually, this is not the first time I was. Yeah, the first this year.
Yeah.
And I was busy. Yeah. It's 5 years. I did this here to get so. Apa dia rada longgar. Oh, longgar. Extend. Duplicate aja. Tak sambil bentar. Tak sambil bentar. Oke.
We'll take one more minute for your thoughts.
You can ask
Okay,
I also
you can finish your thoughts here, and then I'm going to ask for a few volunteers
your opinion
for your thoughts on restrictions on voting rights. Bahasa Inggris, bahasa Indonesia, bahasa apa saja, semua boleh. Okay, let's talk about restrictions, reasonable restrictions on voting. Who would like to start? Yes.
In some reason, I agree that restriction in Indonesia is have to be for children and police and army, because for police and army we had to not give any right for them to vote, to keep the election being neutral. And for children, I think they don't have any right to vote because they don't have enough consideration to make a good decision. So I think children will be in restriction for voting. Maybe that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. And about children, I want everyone to remember they don't have enough consideration to make good decisions. This is extremely crucial. You mentioned police. So in Indonesia, are police not permitted to vote? Okay, all right, good. Who else would like to share? I didn't know that. That's also good. Who else would like to share?
Okay, I would like to
Yes. Do you have the mic? Oh, okay. Who would like to go next? I know some young ladies here would like to, but if someone here would like to, that's fine. Who has the mic? Okay, please.
Actually, I would like to ask and also give my own opinion about the restriction. We understand that the regulation of the election during the election of the president, sorry. In Indonesia, we know that the age of the 17 it's has to permit to become to join the voting election. So we know at the age of 17, but I look around when I had already my very first election at that time when I was in 17 years old. I feel like my friends around me are still confusing about what they actually wanted to choose, especially for the election. So for you, I would like to ask about what is actually the perfect age for someone who do the election voters, because we know that in Indonesia there's a lot of people who still like think that election is something useless and it is not like changing our future regulation, especially about the government system as we know. So I would like to ask about that. And what about in the United States? What are definitely like the regulation of the for the election? How age that someone can definitely ask the perfect age for do the voter election.
Yes,
Thank you.
okay, that's very, very thoughtful. Thank you. So at what age in the USA? And also you made a point about people thinking elections don't make any difference. They don't do any good, so why bother? So really, in an election, everyone who can vote should vote. You should have 100% participation. But in the US, usually it's around 25%. Most people don't vote. Because, like you said, there have been some exceptions. We'll talk about a few. They don't believe it matters. Well, why don't they believe it matters? Because it's never mattered before. So that means that maybe democracy is broken and we have to work harder. Or we need leadership that is willing to make changes instead of serving themselves, securing their own benefits. They really want to promote democracy. We're going to talk about that because it's crucial to democracy. And as far as picking an age, you're right. I can't pick an age. I don't think anyone can pick an accurate age because I believe there are 15-year-olds who will make a better decision than some 70-year-olds, only because of their personality. Maybe they're concerned. They have better access to information. And there are some people, they might live to be 100, and they will never have wisdom. So it's not really the age, but the age is something like a tool that we can use. One issue that came up in America is that I don't drink alcohol, but many young people do. The age of drinking alcohol is 21, but the age of going to war is 18. So what's the right age to vote? If you can't even drink alcohol until you're 21, should you be able to vote about whether you give your life in a war? Maybe that number should either alcohol age is lower or war age is higher. So sometimes numbers matter, but there is no perfect number. Okay, let's take one more. Any other thoughts on restrictions? Yes.
We discussed about the four age, mental capacity, and punishment, and religious aspects, but according to us, children should not be voted for because you can just give them candy and they would vote for whoever.
So we should definitely restrict votings on children. And for the mental capacity, it depends on the person. Like if the person has a mental disability, but still is able to comprehend what they are doing and what they are voting for their future, then I think they should be able to vote. But I'm sure it's going to be very hard to work with. For the punishments in Indonesia, they do have the right to vote. They're still citizens of Indonesia. They might have done something bad, but prisoners or jails is just like a harsh word for rehabilitation. So I think they still have the right to vote. And for religious restrictions, everyone should vote, regardless of their religion in Indonesia. It's been like that for hundreds of years.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we finished with your comments because they kind of are the essence of democracy. So, but I'm here to talk about problems in democracy in the U.S. right now, and especially voting. And because everyone in here studies law or government, we're going to discuss some pretty difficult things in here, but knowledge is power, okay? So now let's move on to some other questions. The next one we're going to talk about just really briefly is, you all are here, you're getting very good education. I think you or your parents or the government or someone is paying for you to be some of the best educated people in Indonesia. Should that matter? Let's say you voting, will you be in a better position to make a good decision than maybe a mother who is not educated and who is at home with her children? This one, we're not going to take as much time as the last one because these are related. Who gets to vote and why? What restrictions are reasonable? Because the next thing we're going to talk about is who gets to vote, and education matters a lot in that. We're going to take this 1 minute quickly. How much does education matter? And think about education like this, formal education, pendidikan, versus knowledge. Knowledge that you can find from other sources. Okay. Okay, sorry, that was really quick, but we've still got a lot to cover. Okay, who wants to tell me quickly, if you have a distinction between education versus information, how much they should matter? Volunteer? Yes.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, in the ideal one, we need educated people because to choose someone, we need to know the needed of the country. Like, the countries need economy, people, or the requirement for the people.
Okay.
So we need educated people, not just people with knowledge and specific education.
Yes, so that in order to, people who should vote, they should have education. Now, either you or someone else, what about people who don't have education? Like I mentioned, the mother who does not have a formal education, who is at home taking care of children.
Maybe I can explain in
Please.
Jadi kita perlu seseorang yang memiliki keahlian yang dibutuhkan oleh sebuah negara. Bukan orang yang hanya memiliki pengetahuan sebenarnya untuk menunjang kebutuhan negara. Ya, terima kasih.
Okay, I think I understand that. Did that answer the question about the woman who's at home? Anybody want to be, does that person get to vote too? The woman who's at home with children? Yes.
Other than that, democracy requires education. The thing is, only the person with knowledge. That's why our government needs to fulfill the right to get knowledge.
Okay. I think what she said was that people still need to be educated. And the solution is not for the woman who's at home with children to not vote, it's that the government needs to educate everyone. Is that fair, what you said? Okay, very good. Let's move on. We're gonna look at some pros and cons. Does democracy require education? And should voting be limited to educated people? Let's look at some pros and cons. These are why we would say yes. Because educated people may understand politics and problems better, like the first young man said. Also, this is going to be really important. They will be harder, we hope, to deceive. Lebih susah menipu orang yang ada pendidikan. And yang tidak ada pendidikan, maybe mudah sekali deceive, ditipu. People with more education are going to be harder to trick. And this could help stop dishonest leaders, people who gain power by manipulating orang lain, by deceiving others. And also, educated voters may feel the responsibility to understand the issues and take the time to research them to make a good decision. And they also might think about the country's future, not just what I'm worried about today. These are the reasons why we might want to value more educated people as voters. But every point has a counterpoint, right? Every argument yes, there's usually a no. Everyone in a democracy should be equal. So what do we do about that? If everyone's voice matters, how does that happen unless they get to vote too? And that limiting education only to the educated can impact democracy. Also, education doesn't always mean wisdom. There can be a lot of people who are very well educated, but not so wise, maybe corrupt. And there are people who are not educated, but they have wisdom and their hearts are good and they want what's good for the country and their children. And also this, many people, maybe they don't have any education. That's why I use the example of the uneducated woman who's home with her children. But she knows her children are hungry. She knows she can't afford a doctor. She knows her children need to be educated so their lives will be better than hers. So there's a lot of learning and knowledge and wisdom that people have, even if they're not educated, like as well as we all are. Also, an educational requirement can be unfair to the poor if they can't get education. And the young lady's solution in the back was, that's why we need education for everyone. But otherwise, richer people generally get more education. And then if they're the only ones who can vote, that can really affect government so that it only reflects the votes of the opinions of rich people. These are thoughts. Obviously, these yes, no, these are all valid concerns. And also the compromises, like not one or the other, but provide education for more. Okay, now we're going to talk very deeply about democracy in the United States. This is going to be a little bit of history. This was America in the beginning. Waktu mulai, waktu Constitution, 1776. Sekarang ini Amerika Serikat, tapi pada waktu itu, at that time, there are only these 13 original colonies. And that's when the Constitution was formed, these 13 countries. The Constitution begins, we the people, and a long list of requirements or goals. But when they said, we the people, they meant people who owned property, meaning they were rich, and they were white, and they were often Christians. So they were rich, white men. That meant democracy in 1776, when America first began, meant 6% of the population could vote. Does that sound like democracy? Well, back then it was, because otherwise the king said what happened. So the good news is that for democracy, America, since the beginning, has been trending toward inclusion. Right now, we're in a big dip, but American democracy has made amazing gains since the beginning, when only 6% of Americans could vote. To that later were added Black men, not women, after the end of slavery. We're going to talk to that about that. And then women were added. And then in 1924, 1924, orang Amerika asli, Native Americans yang tersebut baru bisa memilih umum. Native Americans who lived here first were not permitted to vote until 1924. So American voting rights have a very long, difficult history. So before, only 6% of Americans could vote anyway. We've made great progress since then, but we had a very difficult period in just before the American Civil War. Many of you know America was a country from the beginning that had slavery. Slaves, I think, are budak, is that right? So then there were traders who went to Africa, captured people, kidnapped them, brought them to America, and sold them, usually in South Carolina. So a lot of people say Ellis Island is where Americans has welcomed people. Actually, for Black people, like many of my ancestors, it was here in Columbia, South Carolina, because that's where the slave auctions were held. And America, in the beginning, there was a conflict. Can people have slaves or not? These blue states said no. These red states said we must have slaves to do our work. So America made a compromise from the very beginning. We will allow slavery down here. And this was a problem from the very beginning. Europeans warned Benjamin Franklin, you have a Declaration of Independence. You want a country built on liberty. How can you do that? And from the beginning, you allow slavery. It was a good question, and the French were right, because this notion of inequality has plagued and bothered America since the very beginning until today. And when it comes to voting rights, this is where the conflict is. So these are the blue states. These others were not states yet in 1871. America had a civil war that ended slavery, meaning all these people in the South, in these red states, Buddha, orang Buddha, ada banyak lebih daripada orang putih, more slaves than white people. Do they get to vote? Now, if you're a Black person, but you say, I get to vote, and I've got a lot of things I'd like to change. If you're a white person down here, do you want Black people to vote? What do you think? If white people are minority, only a few, Black people formerly enslaved are the majority. Do you want Black people to vote? No, because they might want education. They might want to be able to get good jobs, to compete with you for jobs. They might want to be able to buy property. They might want to marry your white children. They might want all these things, which were illegal. All of those things were prohibited. Even my grandmother, her parents were never married because it was illegal for white people and non-white people to marry until, who wants to guess until when? In America, it was illegal orang putih dan orang yang bukan putih tidak dilarang kawin. Sejak kapan? Who would like to guess when that law ended? 1967. Not that long ago.
Yeah.
So the problem is that this area, does anyone know the term white supremacy? This is a white supremacy area. So the North is better, but slavery really impacted America. So now we have voting. Black people got the right to vote. And then what do you think that the white people in charge immediately tried to do? Stop it. They tried to stop it. So we had constitutional amendments that said they could vote. But then the states put up obstacles. Well, actually, let's look at what they did. How did they stop voting? Violence. If black people tried to vote, sometimes they would kill them. Maybe you've heard of lynching. I said some of this talk is difficult. They would hang people from trees and put a sign, this person tried to vote, to scare other people. They would give a literacy test. You have to be able to read this in order to vote. Could they read? Hindi dilarang. Education was illegal for black people, so how could they read? Of course they couldn't. Property test. Well, you have to own property. Someone who was a slave, did they own property? No. Grandfather. If your grandfather voted, kalau eyang mo sendiri bisa voted, you can vote. If you're a slave, well, reality is maybe your grandfather was the person who owned you. But in reality, if you're a slave, your grandfather was not able to vote, and you can't vote. And then there were certain elections only white people could vote in. So black people couldn't vote. And then let's say there were some wealthy black people. There were carpenters, there were blacksmiths. And so they did okay after slavery. So they would try to register to vote, and maybe that they were permitted, but then someone would just delete them from the list. Just say something's wrong here and delete them from the list. Or they had been prisoners in prison, or they had to pay a tax to vote. You have to pay to vote, and sometimes only some people would have to pay. So all of these were different ways to keep people from voting right after the Civil War. The problem is, well, actually the good news is, these were terrible problems. And as with democracy now, people fought against them, and they fought for the right to vote. And it was not easy. Many people died fighting for these rights. But they ended up, 100 years later, 1965, a law passed called the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that said all of these rules and obstacles are illegal. Illegal. We cannot do them anymore. And more than that, they said, if any of these states try, let's go back to these states, any of these states try to make voting rules, they have to get permission from the federal government in Washington, D.C., because we don't trust them, because they cannot be trusted to protect voting rights. So that was a very good advance in America. And if you remember the 6% of Americans that were able to vote, because of the Voting Rights Act, most Americans were able to vote. This was progress in democracy. It was excellent progress. And then one day, guess what happened? I think you know this guy. I hope. Barack Obama. So he was America's president, one of America's best presidents, from 2009 to 2017. And that showed that democracy in America worked. So many people came out and voted, and he represented the people of America. So that's great, right? Right?
Yes. Yes.
For us, it was great. For some other people, it was time to panic and pass laws to get back to the old ways. Stop all these people from voting and move back to closer to that 6% that can control elections. So this is when the troubles began. The voting problems, American democracy reached the best under Barack Obama. And because of that, opposition immediately started finding ways to reduce voting. Okay, there's a Supreme Court decision. Some of you in here study constitutional law, I believe. Okay, so there was a Supreme Court decision called Shelby County versus Holder. Eric Holder was the U.S. Attorney General at the time. And these were states essentially that said, we want to get rid of the Voting Rights Act. We don't need it anymore. That decision went to the U.S. Supreme Court. Conservatives, the opposition party, had added 3 people, and all of them were opposed to Barack Obama. So when Shelby came to the U.S. Supreme Court, they said, we agree. We're going to get rid of the Voting Rights Act. We don't need it anymore. It was really a reaction to the Obama presidency. And the result was those laws that protected people in those red states, those could come back. Nothing stopped those red states from suppressing voting again. So now those red states, slave states, can behave badly again. What do you think happened? Do you think they continued to respect voter rights? Or do you think they went right back to what they used to do? They went right back. Yeah, they went right back to it. So they don't murder people for voting, but here's what they not yet. But they do, especially just get rid of the people. So in the US, we know where different districts vote. We know this district voted for Obama. This one voted for Trump. This one voted for Kamala. So what the party in power will say, I'm going to look at that district, that's the opposition, and get rid of voters. And so this is a big problem. They can't charge a poll tax, a voting tax. So instead they have voter ID laws. In Indonesia, maybe you have a voter ID law. If you want to vote, you have to show your ID. In America, you don't. Because this is like a tax. Because your ID shows your address. But if you are poor, maybe you can't pay the rent. So you have to leave this place and go to another address and another address. So you have to get a new ID every time. For poor people, this is an obstacle. This is making people pay to vote. Also, you have to go someplace to an office. If you don't have a car, you live far away, buses are difficult, maybe you have to work every day. It's difficult to get an ID, so because it's an obstacle, it's not required in the US. Felons, some states still require, do not allow felons to vote, and that's increasing. I want to give you one example of Georgia, which is a deep red state. Thank you. It's a very, very red state. A lot of voting discrimination. They removed so many people and said, you cannot vote. Let's see, this is a little bit difficult to explain, but I want to give you one example. Is that when people vote, you take your vote and you put it in a drop box, right? You put it in a box. But For some neighborhoods like mine, I walk 5 minutes and I vote. I leave my ballot, my vote. But in this one area, which I think Barack Obama won this one like almost everybody. So the opposition knows they're not going to win here. So they don't want people to vote here. So they reduced the drop boxes, which meant for every 100,000 people who vote, for 100,000 people, there's one box. There's one box. But for other people, down the street, this way, that way, over there. So for some people, it's very easy to vote. And for some people, it's very, very difficult. And also, they've made it very difficult for poor people to vote. So you have to wait in a long line. Maybe you have to wait all day, 8 hours to vote. And that was happening. But if you have to line up 8 hours, 9 hours, maybe you're thirsty, right? Maybe you're hungry. Or you'll just go home. So some people would come to give water. If I have to line up 10 jam menunggu untuk memilih, maybe I just want a little water. Dilarang kasih air putih untuk orang minum. That's how terrible the voting was getting here. Okay. Why is this? I think we know why some states want to make voting difficult. They don't want people to cheat. They don't want people to vote here and there and there. So that's one good reason. But they don't want opposition to vote. But some parties like mine want to make it easier to vote because that promotes democracy. Okay, so what is the hope? All of that I think is bad news, but I'm hopeful in American democracy because there's a new law that has been proposed, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, that would restore protection in those red states so that those rights are preserved. John Lewis is, someone said that President Suharto has now been declared pahlawan. John Lewis is an American pahlawan. When he was a young man, he worked very hard for voting rights, including here. This was a protest to give Black people the right to vote in 1965. I was born in 1965. This is him. This trooper is beating him, broke his skull. He ended up becoming a congressman for many decades until he just died in 1920. You can see women getting beaten here too. Bloody Sunday was on national news. And because of this attack, this vicious attack, the Voting Rights Act passed in the first place. So we have hope that there will be new laws to protect the votes of the American people again. Okay, so that's the rest of voting rights. That was the longest section. And I'm sorry if that took a little bit of time, but the point that I wanted to make is that there are people in America who are working very, very hard to stop others from voting. But there are other people working very, very hard to continue our voting rights. Any questions before we move to the next section?
Questions?
That's fine, because we're going to talk about, keep an eye on the time here, we're going to talk about, we're finishing at 12 or 12:15? 12?
12.
Okay, so then we're going to go through two more issues very quickly, and they are related. So quick question, I want to get you to engage again for just 2 minutes. Part of voting is being educated about the issues. We talked about that. How do you get information? Okay? So 2 questions. How do you get information? And how do you know if it's reliable? Okay, let's take just 2 minutes. How do you get information and how do you know it's reliable?
How do you get it?
I'm looking at you, Free. Are you thinking about how you get information? Okay, you're thinking about it? Good. Okay, I think we're good. Who wants to tell me how do you get news or information? And then the bigger question is, how do you know that it's reliable? Who would like to share? Yes.
So let me introduce my name. My name is Tomar Almani. So usually I get information is from, of course, social media, because I'm active in social media, and then politics. There's some of my family is politics, and friends and family.
Okay.
How I know it's reliable? Because social media, usually I see the information from the verified informators.
Okay. That's helpful. Anybody else want to share?
Good morning, Miss. My name is Bichi Abdul Kaliurang in the beach. I also want to talk about social media. For social media, I think social media is the new world that we have currently. Whenever a news, whether it's a lie or it's a truth, spread in social media, it takes a little bit time before it spread around the world everywhere. And this happens in many places around the world. Even in the United States, you will have an issue that is maybe not real or it's kind of lie or something. Immediately when it's on media, it has the effect to go everywhere around the world in a short period of time. Yeah.
All right, I want to thank you because this gentleman just saved me like 5 slides, which is that if you get your news from social media, you might not always know, is it true or is it a lie? You can fact check, but that fact checker is lying because they want to promote the lies. And the lies spread, and then very quickly they have spread around the world. And it's just difficult to know what's the truth and what isn't. So social media is good because it can spread good news, good information. A lot of people protest the US or the current administration, and it's easy to organize for various things with social media. So you can take action, but as the young man said, false news spreads so quickly. And maybe you usually go to the same few websites, you're going to get the same kind of information. Often that's the problem. And then they're like X and has algorithms, they amplify, they expand lies, misinformation. So, and they can use these to divide voters. And this is about voting rights. How can you vote responsibly if you don't have good facts, if you don't know what the truth is? This is just a look at, maybe you've heard Donald Trump lies a lot, every day. But his strategy is, and he has spoken about this, if I tell the lie enough times, some people will start to believe it. Okay, so we've got a whole lot of lies out there from the president. What's the solution so that people know the truth? You should be able to read the newspaper or your online news, your social media. But what if you can't get news there? Okay, so has anyone heard of the Washington Post or Jeff Bezos? You probably heard of Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos owns Amazon. He's, I think, the second richest man in the world after Elon Musk. And he wants President Trump to protect Amazon. Amazon was trying to negotiate out of some tariffs. Around this time, a cartoon writer named Ann Talmaeus made a cartoon about rich billionaires bowing down to Trump. She's a very famous satire cartoonist. And Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post said, no, you can't put that in the newspaper. So what does that mean then? So Ann Talmaeus resigned. She said, this is an attack on press freedom. If we cannot criticize the government, then we are no longer the free press. So she resigned, and many other people did. So this is Trump. The Disney Corporation was also making concessions. Bezos, OpenAI, Zuckerberg, and this was a person who runs the LA Times. So when you don't have reliable information, or you're afraid of the president, you censor yourself, you don't publish certain news, and then, for example, here, the Pittsburgh Gazette, they fired people for not producing cartoons that Trump would like. And then the LA Times, Los Angeles Times, very favorable to Kamala Harris. And the newspaper wanted to endorse her for president. The owner of the newspaper, Patrick Soon-Shiong, said, no, don't. So the press now has become totally corrupt. And how is that? Rupert Murdoch uses his news to promote Trump politics. Jeff Bezos uses his news to protect Amazon's business. Elon Musk uses X to promote all of his businesses. And this person, a wealthy billionaire, Sheldon Adelson, very pro-Trump, very pro-Israel. You'll never read bad news about Netanyahu in this paper that he owns. So this just means the news becomes less reliable. And if you can't trust the news, how can you make a good decision? I don't have an answer other than this is a terrible problem for democracy, that our news has been corrupted. And if you notice, it's corrupted by, look, the richest man in the world owns X, second owns most of this other media, third richest owns Facebook, Instagram, the Washington Post. These are all billionaires, and they own the US media, making it very difficult. So that when the truth matters, when you don't know what the truth is, how can you make a good voting decision? So I'm skipping through a little bit to get to the last point, which is related to the point that I just made. Who owns all those newspapers now? Billionaires. So billionaires are controlling information that makes it difficult for us to vote. But they also are influencing elections directly. With Silicon Valley, there are so many people now who have billions of dollars, more money than they will ever spend in their lifetime. And so now they're using that money to influence elections. So this is no longer one person has one vote. Now people are able to use their money to affect democracy. Well, why is that? For the constitutional scholars, there was a lawsuit called Citizens United. Again, this was during the Obama presidency. So it's to make sure we don't have another Obama. And that court decision said that individuals have one vote, and we can give money to support our party, our candidate, but there's a maximum. Citizens United said corporations, companies can give money, no maximum. So I want you to think here. If, for example, Pertamina, that's the big oil company, if Pertamina could influence elections, what might happen to environmental laws? Or what if, I think Garam Kretek, the company that makes Garam Kretek, if they can influence elections, what happens to laws around public health laws? You can see how corporations with major money and donations can impact democracy. And in the US, this is exactly what has happened. As rich people give money, other people have to give more money, and more money, and more money. And now elections cost billions of dollars. If I want to run for office, I cannot, because I need to have someone giving me billions of dollars. That means ordinary people, our voices become smaller and smaller. Elon Musk spent over $250 million to have Trump elected. And you see, he's in the White House with his feet up on the desk, wreaking havoc. He paid for that. Sheldon Adelson, pro-Israel, and Netanyahu, $75 million. Timothy Mellon, $75 million. This person, $100 million. So what are we supposed to do, individuals who have just our voice and a little bit of money? Well, you do what Zoran Mamdani did. If you know about the New York election, everybody in New York gave their little bit of money and unlimited time because he was a candidate for the people and he won. So I do, despite all this money, and you know, Elon Musk, all of these people fought against Zoran Mamdani, but Mamdani still won because I feel like this talk is a lot of bad news, but there is reason for hope, and that is Americans do not want all this money in elections, and Americans are lobbying to get rid of it, to change the laws after Trump. There are surveys that show Americans do not like it. Americans still believe in democracy. Zoran Mamdani won in a three-way race, and he won clearly, definitively. And also there's a new John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and many people are hopeful will pass this law to restore voting protections. There are some new independent, I don't read New York Times, I have some. I now read Midas Network, The Bulwark, Heather Cox Richardson. These are small, independent, reliable people that produce news that is fact-checked and is true, and they can give you sources. So we're getting new sources of news that are not owned by billionaires. And ultimately, as I've said a few times, the story of democracy in America, it's been much, much worse in the past. Much, much worse. But democracy tends toward progress over time. And I believe that Americans are still hopeful and that democracy still has hope in America because of many things. But if you listen to this quote by John Lewis, democracy is not a state, it's an act. You have to keep working for it. You can never rest. You must participate and make democracy happen. Thomas Jefferson said, as long as the presses can be protected, we may trust them for light. Well, now we're finding new presses. The old ones have been corrupted and taken over, but new independent press is coming up and is now more popular than the old press. Franklin D. Roosevelt said, democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. This is still happening against so many odds, and so many obstacles, it is still happening. And American people are protesting. Everything that you've heard me say here is so awful. The American people are protesting in millions because American people still believe in democracy. And this is a sign from a protest last month. First, they came for the media. Then, well, we don't know what happened after that, because once we lose media, we lose information and our ability to make really good decisions. So that's my update on U.S. voting rights and the challenges facing democracy today. The current situation is grim, but there are many reasons for hope and optimism. Thank you very, very much for your time and your attention. And I know the time is up, and realize you just finished your midterms, and so you're just getting back to school, might need a break, but if you have any last minute questions, I'm happy to address some of them to my ability. Otherwise, I believe the class is finished for now.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for this wonderful enlightenment. I just want to ask about the democracy. When we're talking about democracy, we're not talking about the government of the particular country. We're talking about the democracy globally, especially when we're talking about the democracy in America, the US. So my question is, what can you say about democracy when the United States is oppressing another country? Like what's happening now in Sudan, Palestine, and some other countries in Africa. So is that democracy, or do we have anything that we can do to move out from this catastrophe here and there? Thank you very much.
Yes, I can almost cry over that, because the Americans that I know hate what's going on in Palestine and Sudan. Most people don't even know what's going on in Sudan because the news is not covering it, and in so many other places. Long ago, the U.S. would at least be helpful. The U.S. would help negotiate a little bit in Sudan, never effectively, but I believe that the oppressors in Sudan currently are out of control. There is no one to check any of their power. In Gaza, many people in my party have supported Gaza rights for years. Also, my church that I belong to is an activist church and called Gaza apartheid like 30 years ago. About 30 years ago, drew attention to what was going on in Gaza as apartheid. And my church is actually very active in partnership, raising money, interfaith communities. So there are many Americans, not just me, that, to not use too strong a word, many Americans hate what is happening in Gaza, in Sudan, and so many other places. But the democracy aspect is our president is not listening. So we need a new president. I voted for Kamala Harris. I think she would have been better. But Americans, many were not ready to vote for a woman. I think there were a lot of reasons. But yeah, the current situation, who in Sudan is going to give Trump money? You have to give Trump money to get his attention. Nobody is giving him money. So I believe that, like John Lewis said, democracy needs to happen everywhere. Some countries don't have any democracy. They have strong governments. People have to die to get democracy. But in America, people died. People died for the right to vote. That Bloody Sunday, people died. And that's 1965 is when I was born. It's not that long ago that in your lifetime, people will have to fight and struggle in order to have good government. I can't say go do it. You only have one life. But I believe that sometimes that's the cost of democracy. Part of the reason I'm so sad to see democracy suffer so much in America now.
Thank you so much, Ma. I also have a question, but I think my question and his question is very similar, but I think it's different. So I have this question before, and I write it. I had that you recorded. My question is, in discussion about democracy. How should we understand how should we understand the situation on one country becomes involved in one country's internal issues without formal permission? Like when a country is like charging another country with maybe genocide or something, and inside that country, the government declared that that's what the other country is trying maybe to impose on that country is not true, and all the sources that the information have come from is also not true, and also the involvement of international organizations in a sovereign country. Do you think that leads to the, or I said, to end of democracy, like for maybe the decision of big international organizations like the UN and so on developing countries like Nigeria, maybe. So that is my question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think part of the answer is information. Like Sudan, like Nigeria, it's information, getting accurate information. To give you a very difficult example here, I very much support the people of Palestine, but the Associated Press recently published an article that showed that aid that's given to families in Gaza, a lot of times women seek aid, they are being exploited by people giving the aid, Palestinian men. We like to look at Palestine victim, Israel victimizer. This is a little bit more complicated now because we're looking at what is going on within Gaza. Also, it's good to understand the role of Hamas. If we really want freedom and a good life for the Palestinian people, you see what I'm saying? News and information help. For example, my church is doing a fundraiser. We read that article and thought, okay, we need to get money to Palestinian women, because if we get the money to Palestinian men, they may be exploited and to get the money to them. So sometimes organizations like the UN, they have corruption too. But the solution is not, I believe, to get rid of the UN. It is transparency and to expose corruption. Because the UN is democratic. People pay money to the UN. And if countries decide they're not going to support because the UN is corrupt, then the UN can't exist. So I believe in the UN. I believe in the UN agencies for human rights, but they can do better. And as far as one country trying to influence another country, I believe, like US now is trying to send troops to Venezuela. I don't believe in that. I will make an exception, is that I supported when I was younger, the US boycott in South Africa. I thought the US should not send one penny to South Africa under apartheid. For Chrysler, like other organizations that are providing military vehicles to kill innocent people, the US should not be giving them any kind of benefits, taxes, or otherwise. So I believe there are lots of ways to influence bad behavior within a country, but I don't believe that the US should be attacking Venezuela because they want to get rid of Maduro, change the regime. I think the best thing the US can do is be an example. When a country has a strong economy, provides opportunities for the people, and they provide a good life for people. Never perfectly. It's never been perfect in the US, but it's been pretty good. I think that's the best thing a country can do to promote change in another country. But I do feel very sad. My in-laws, I have in-laws who live in Nigeria, in Lagos, and Lagos State is pretty good. But most of my friends and relatives are leaving Nigeria. I don't know if you're from Nigeria. They're leaving Nigeria because opportunities are very limited because of corruption. Some people are fighting. Last year, there were some protests, some developments that I think were going very well. But some countries are so authoritarian, under such dictators, it might seem helpless, but people still have to try.
So, after getting your explanation regarding
after getting your explanation regarding the democracy, I do believe that every country has the problem regarding the democracy, especially in the US. So, do you think is the democracy only the illusion? Because I ever heard one of the old woman from America. She said that she has been living in the America for 20 years, and she said that there is no democracy in the America, especially for voting the Donald Trump and also the Obama. She said there is no democracy system at the time. So she said as well that democracy is only the illusion. So do you agree, or what do you think about that?
I think that uh, I 75% agree. Because remember that 6% that I said about democracy? As long as those people controlled every election, they called it a democracy. As soon as Barack Obama won and they could no longer control the outcome, everything changed. Now they don't want democracy, they want a strong executive, Trump. So does that mean it was never a democracy to begin with? It only was the illusion? Maybe. But people, so maybe this was what is intended, but people have fought for democracy and people have gotten it. No denying women can vote in America now. Poor people can vote in America now. Black people can vote. Native American people can vote. This is progress. Will you see progress in 20 years? Maybe not. But over 200 years, absolutely. But the work, we have to be vigilant. And also there's a saying, I don't remember who said it, America is a terrible, democracy is a terrible form of government. It's just better than the rest. Something to that too. Okay. Imagine you're feeling pretty hungry now. Yes. Okay, thank you very, very much. I appreciate your attention.
Yeah. Thank you so much to Ibu Kimberly for the insightful knowledge to us. Yeah. We have very interesting discussion, but we have also limited time. So Alhamdulillah, we have reached out the end of our class today. So before that, let us give applause to all of us. Yeah. And on behalf of faculty, I would like to thank to all of students, yeah, for your attention and for your engagement, yeah, and special appreciation to Ibu Kimberly for the insightful contribution today. And we would like to give the gift, yeah. This is the signs that you have attended to this class.
Thank you. Terima kasih.
Sama-sama.
So there is.
This way. This way.
Yeah. This way. This is the camera.
Okay.
Maybe if you want to stand up.
Please stand up. Please.
One more. 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I appreciate you very, very much. Very much. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, let's finish our class by setting hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Thank you everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.